Some of us can do that too well. Ring of fire. I'd mash the button. Is it going? You mean this is just a sham? Somebody thought I need the illusion of being in charge. I fell for the oldest one in the book, mashing a button that doesn't do anything.
We use that button to start it.
It doesn't go anywhere.
It makes a noise.
Well, skip what I was going to say. I'm going to tell you about how life deals with men. Having everybody mash buttons. It's running. Why do I mash this then? Just have something to do?
You need the noise.
So we know when to turn it off.
The noise. You got me. You got me. You don't need that. All right, here we go. All right. Are we rolling? Jesus. First off, I wanted to be sure from last night that all of you, for very good and practical reasons, as viscid as it may have sounded last night, but all of you need to get a clear picture of how it is that life has got things arranged at the secondary level. There is a variation of it, its own kind of animalistic, Darwinian survival of the fittest, etc., at the primary level. And at that level also, man is engaged in that. But that is just of no consequence nowadays, unless some of you are watching this out in the wilds of New Guinea or somewhere, watching it on a kerosene-driven TV set. But other than that, this kind of competition, there is some reality as always, because the secondary world cannot be absolutely divorced from that which drives man and life at the primary level. And so in a sense, you can say that people are competing for food when you're out competing for a job, when you're out at an interview. But the thing is, you are not literally out fighting someone else for food. When that is the case, back to my kind of crude story between the cats and the birds, they are fighting for space. It is like professional wrestling, or it'd be like boxing in some states where there cannot be a draw. Somebody has got to win. So on that basis, it is not that the cats or a cat will eat a bird partially. At the secondary level of man, what is not taken into consideration is also the unconditional arrangement that any human trait, that which is singularly human, ideas, morality, theories, mindsets, but just ideas, anything that is dissimilar to man A must be seen as a do-or-die struggle. It must be unconditionally rejected to the point of denying that it exists, such as our enemies have no conscience. Those across the border have absolutely no sense of propriety. They're idiots, they're subhuman, etc. And coevally, I know I'm going back over, I just want to wrap up one or two things that some of you look too blank. Coevally, life has other groups of people, reasonably intelligent, many times apparently extremely intelligent, standing there in the city denouncing this, saying that it is evolutionarily or civilly unprofitable because it is too short-sighted, it is too self-serving for those involved. The general denunciation of war and aggression, which has always been going on, but they can take it very specifically. So you've got, as always, part of life's body, having men at the secondary level, no longer fighting, we'll assume, those of you hearing this, no longer fighting literally, killing one another over sex, over food, over a cave to get out of the elements, but fighting over what appears to be that which is invisible, that which appears to be singular to man. That no animal fights another animal, as far as you can tell, over an idea. But men apparently do. But also notice, it is not an anomaly that there is a good segment, not in quantity, but the kind of voices that the city will raise up and record that historically condemn this. And not just on the basis of morality, not just religious prophets and those within a spiritual framework saying, well, the gods don't want us to kill each other. It's people nowadays, and it's always been some around, but nowadays you can see it even more clearly, that there are people of a more humanistic tendency, if that would be their religious persuasion, that say it may not have anything to do with religion, it is simply unprofitable, that we are, all here in this little planet by ourselves, and we've got to live together, and we've got to quit killing off each other, especially over the nonsensical stuff such as, and then they've got their own terms, but you know what it is, the secondary world. So you have got this coevally existing, and they will point out, and if you listen at that level, which would, if you were at the ordinary street level of thinking, it would not be unusual at all, for you to hear this and to take it to heart. For them to say this is, forget religion, forget morality, they just simply, someone points out, some part of life's nervous system through man points out that this kind of absolute denial of your competitor, your neighbor, all your not eyes, your denial that the human traits that you cherish, whoever you are, and that you uphold, that you deny their existence in someone else to the same degree that their manifestation, their expression of it is dissimilar to yours. They say that is too short-sighted. We're going to kill ourselves. They have to point out that man has got to be like every other animal, that any sane man on this planet has got to look after his own best interest. And everybody in the city that's sane and sober goes, wait, that's true. I do. And then this voice raises up again and says, well, in that case, do not fight over that which is of no substantial consequence. Do not go out there and fight somebody. Don't be prepared to fight somebody over an economic theory. Don't do that. Don't you understand? That is not in your own best interest. Forget what it's going to do to them that you're going to kill somebody. Let's forget that. But do you understand if that continues to spread, or if it just stays at the level at which it has been operating for thousands of years? If you feel it's your right to kill this guy over here because of his political beliefs, then you do understand somebody else is going to sneak up behind you, and they're going to play that game on you. That is simply not in your own best interest. And many, many, many people's nervous system, when they hear it, will go, that's true, that's true. There's no doubt about it. That it is unprofitable. But notice, the wrap-up is this. It is not unprofitable. Now, at that level it is. There's no way to try to win somebody over. That's not what this is about, of course. But it is the height of efficiency in polarized regions, which, in case you haven't noticed, is where we are. It is the height of efficiency. It ensures a forceful transfer of energy, as opposed to if people were operating in the main, at the secondary level, in a kind of relative, more expansive, more inclusive mode intellectually, as they say they should, as they will agree, yes, we should. But if they were actually doing that, if in fact Group X and Group Y, capitalists and fascists, whoever, if they did look upon their neighbors, their potential competitors, which are indeed, also remember, synonymous with their food supply here, if they looked upon them as being simply acceptable variations in the great garden we call life, where would be the kind of dynamic force that drives city history? You would not have it. It is very efficient. I would suggest, I'm not going any further, but I would suggest that that is part of the reason, if you consider the triaxial potential that we used to refer to as C, D, and E sources of energy, like three different directions, and two of them apparently being active, I would suggest, if you want to consider it, that is one reason always within life's body that anything it does that is efficient. Always notice, somewhere in its body, it is also raising up equally as intelligent, good-looking, clean-smelling men and women who say, tut-tut, ooh, serious tut-tut. And many people involved over there in the other camp, and many people that would be comparable to being in the E-pool. That like, well, we're staying around. These two guys are fighting over something. Bobby's just here having a beer. And then somebody says, but did you hear what they were fighting over? They shouldn't do that. And you can take this guy staying over here in the E-pool. He listens to it and he goes, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's not my business. I don't know either one of them. I don't care. As long as they don't knock my drink out of my hand or slop blood on me. But it just pointed out that this is not the most efficient way to run a bar or a garden, an orchard, a planet. And you'll have people, for as long as you can hold their attention, that be disinterested. They're not part of the CD conflict going on. But even they will go, if somebody says, tut, tut on this. And he hears what the basis of it is. They're not fighting over food. They're not fighting because one of them picked the other guy's pocket. They're fighting over the relative value of the Stanley Cup compared to Super Bowl rings. Who knows what? And somebody stands there and says, tut, tut on those people. Either two men or it's two whole nations fighting. And you can get even disinterested people for a second will go, yeah, you're right, tut, tut. Too short-sighted. This is the kind of behavior that we have got to do away with. No wonder that the neighborhood is just going downhill. No wonder our planet is beginning to resemble a planet. But can you see right quick, I'm going to finally wrap up, that there is a kind of very intense efficiency to this. And the intellect cannot, at the ordinary level, move any further. I, again, can play this game and say I could almost get some intellects, I'll speak for them, to say, yeah, you're right, that is kind of efficient, but that is not the most efficient. And all you got to do is play this with your own intellect. And if you said, yeah, it is, it's the most efficient you could have from any ordinary view. And the ordinary view says, no, it's not. You say, oh, yeah, it is. And I said, no. It may be efficient. I hear what you're saying. In kind of a way that I guess friction energy is efficient. That you can have some little, like a little frog toy, and it's got a friction flywheel in there, and you do this, and you let it go, and it'll run, just off friction energy, which is very crude. And technological views, contemporary views, is very inefficient because it's your arm, and food costs money. And for you to do that and it doesn't run far, it'd be much more efficient to have the thing running electronically today. And so they might say, I'm giving them credit, they might go that far if I hinted that, all right, there is a kind of crude efficiency to this, but that's not it. That's not the height of efficiency. Because what's their idea of the height of efficiency? What has life driven man to think? Is always. And I can put it in certain words, and they would disagree, again. But then they'd look off, and they don't know where else to go with it. But the unanalyzed, induced feeling of the height of efficiency is for the cats to eat all the birds. They wouldn't like that phrase, and they'd, no. All right, goodness to triumph over evil. All right, now we're getting somewhere. Truth. Intellectual, decent people, finally, as the gods intended, finally for them to triumph over all the crude, ill-tempered, bad thinking, Philistines of the world. Then you even get college instructors, body and fender men, dentists, who go, now, yes. But it's the same thing. And the ordinary intellect cannot see it. See, it thinks, is it supposed to? It does not go around being driven by this kind of intellectual energy itself. I'm saying how it would respond if it was presented to this in such a way that caught its attention. And it felt like it had to respond. It would say that what I'm describing, just the ordinary basis of history, without me adding anything, that the kind of conflicts between the Visigoths and Oligoths, and then they all get together and it's them against the Romans, and then it's the Romans against themselves, and then it's the Romans against the Christians, and the Christians leaving there against somebody. I can say that there is a kind of dynamic to that. An ordinary intellect says, all right, but you're talking about a damn friction toy. And if I said, no, that's the height of efficiency at all polar regions, ordinary intellect say, no, I'll go along, at least metaphorically, and say that there is a certain kind of vivaciousness to that there is a certain kind of aliveness to that, but that is not the height of efficiency. And that's all right, tell me what it is. All right, they're either going to say to do away with all the conflict, paradise, utopia, heaven, which is another way of saying that the birds are totally consumed. That the decent Romans can finally look upon, get up on the 7 hills and look around, and there's not a Visigoth in sight. Of course, as some of us know, all they did was go over to the Iberian Peninsula and change their name to Spanish, but too many people get offended by that. Don't write me from... But at any rate, they get up there and they look around. There's no Oligoths, no Huns. The birds are gone. Now, all that spells is the Romans got 2 or 3 days until they die. And yet the ordinary intellect cannot carry it that far. But once you see that, then what is going on now, that's not, of course, the final view of it, if you can ever see, but at the level at which ordinary people think, it is the height of efficiency, which is why they rail against it, is what I was going to suggest. It's why they denounce, I'm saying they, of course, it's part of life's body, within its own triumphant arrangement of energy flows, but it's part of life's body, taking that which is efficient and saying, oh my God, here we go again. That we have got to stop this, that this is inefficient when it is indeed the height of efficiency. That the human intellect cannot conceive of, cannot even theorize any more efficient means than this other than suicide, which is what they would go and say, well, no, real efficiency would be that we didn't have this conflict. In other words, the lungs would finally be at peace, could get somewhere, if all day long they didn't have to breathe in, breathe out, breathe, give them a break. If my brain didn't have to think what I think and then what I don't think, if it wasn't I and not I, if my brains could finally lay down, if my lungs, if my kidneys, that is the idea. If the Romans finally could pull the empire back together and everybody had a good honker on them, wore little leaves in their hair, and no matter where you looked, there was not even a trace of a Visigoth, a Hun, a Greek, or any of those other birds. Based upon it being an absolute denial from one side of the competition, from one side of the field to the other, is the height of efficiency. And you, as always, don't have to take it for a sermon. If you can see it yourself, I just went through it for you. Your own brain, you can do it with yourself. You cannot theorize anything more efficient except destruction, under another term, except heaven, except utopia, except you and Rousseau laying out there the lambs and the lions. Of course, that only works on paper and on canvas, because they're going to lay down together, but only one of them is going to get up. Efficiency is in the dynamic of it apparently being win-lose. There's no doubt about that, even with ordinary intelligence at the animal level, let's say. But here, it just goes completely askew. You can get all sorts of people to admit that out there in the world of the canines, it's dog eat dog. And they say, boy, can you turn a phrase? Is that not what it is? Yes, no doubt about it. Is this not the same? And they would say, well, you are showing some flashes of intelligence, I thought. But no, it is not the same. If it were the same, we'd be no better than animals. We'd simply be animals with brains, which, don't tempt me. I'm not going to say it. I wouldn't say that to a decent human being. But they'd say, well, that's all you're inferring, but it's not. In this world, we can do other things. We can dream a better life. We can forgive one another. We can strive to love. We can do all sorts of things. Except for this. The competition for space, right out there in the dog-eat-dog world, is the same here. And it's so silly. It is so tangibly fallacious to just literally point out that, wait a minute, the world, you just said the world's not big enough for decent ideas, for good ideas, and harmful ideas. Or the world's not big enough for Catholic ideas and Protestant ideas. That's true. Or Islamic ideas and barbarian ideas, as they would see it. And the Muslims say yes. And you say, well, how do you explain the fact that both of them are here? And again, the ordinary intellect, you don't have to be sarcastic, just do it yourself. The ordinary intellect, those of you who can follow this, because literally it's nothing metaphysical. You've got to see that the world is big enough for all ideas. Because it takes, I will admit this, a little more exceptional intellect to even get this far. To go, all right. And you say, well, how is it then, once it gets back to your personal level and you and everyone else perceives the ideas of man, that without it being stated, you are still operating on the basis that space is at an absolute premium. That within a given physical territory, there's only a given amount of food for the wolves to consume, for the cats to consume, and that they have got to fight for it, and that it is do or die. Yes? You treat this the same way. And they might say, well, there is perhaps some validity to what you're saying. And whoever I was talking to, if they were really on the cutting edge of city advancement, they might say, well, in fact, there is much validity to what you're insinuating, because I personally have abandoned all religion. I do not vote. I belong to some organization. We're in favor of one world government. We are in favor of one language. And it all sounds as though that, hey, there's some hope. But there's not. Not any hope in the one lifetime as they're seeing it. They cannot see that they are still, if they took it to the verbal level I was going to, I assume all of you had already jumped there, that they almost paint a verbal picture of a kind of intellectual utopia. That we would not, speaking as humanity, we would not any longer be threatening to kill one another over religious, political, economic differences. Now what if suddenly we had a new prophet? It's nothing new, but I'm trying to bring it into more scholarly, apparently intellectual terminology. And this guy rises up and he says, we must stop all this. I'm not here to promote one religion over another. I'm here to show that they all have a certain kind of similarity. We're all, what would a heathen say? We're not all God's children. We're all the universe's children. And so he does all this, and it would sound all right. And then you say, well, now how about you understand that you're not yet in the majority? And this wise man says, I know. That's why I'm speaking up. Now, so how about all these people who think that you're an idiot, who think these kind of ideas only belong to sissies? How about the kind of guys that you're going to have to kill them to take away their anger? Forget taking away their guns, just take away their hostility. What you're talking about, to do that, you're going to have to kill them. And the guy says, well, I'm certainly not in favor of that. I've already told you that. Now, so what are we going to do with them? Well, something's got to be done, that's for sure. Do you hear me? And he may appear to be here and there. He may appear to be almost on the verge of some kind of non-secular sainthood. That we all have a right to live. You remember that from a few nights ago. We all should be encouraged to be our little selves. Except, of course, when it reaches a level that somebody's interfering with us. The same person that would sound as though that they were expressing a view that was the avant-garde of intellectual development, even though you recognize those who oppose this, I'm not taking it personally, but those that oppose decent, sophisticated, humane, progressive ideas, oh, I don't want to kill them, I don't want to put them in stocks, and they might come up, then it gets vague, and we should re-indoctrinate them. We should hold them down and massage their brains, or we should tickle them. We should hypnotize them. And so it may sound to be non-aggressive, but they are still saying space is at a premium. That things are not going to go well for man, not as well as they could. Things will not be as efficient as long as we have inefficient ideas. And of course, you don't have to feel as though you're going to be sent off on a fool's errand if you think, well, where are these inefficient ideas? Because the person, I believe I'll be safe in speaking for them, will be perfectly delighted to tell you The inefficiency that everyone else sees in life, and the most they can see, is the height of efficiency. If you do not have the kinds of apparent, at that level, at the street level, the apparent irreconcilable, non-relative differences, you would not have mankind intellectually, secondary level, which is now, in a sense, the driving level. You would not have man, the organism, as alive, as combative, not just in a physical sense, and not as competitive. And if he was not as competitive, it wasn't a joke. We would be running these cameras by kerosene. All of your toasters would be run by campfires. Something else that we mentioned that I was trying to pick up last time from that little story that we ran through about the conditional sight is blindness institutionally approved. Conditional, partial sight. It is state-run blindness. And by state and institution, recall, also plug in the fact that life is the ultimate institution. Life is the state. Don't be looking for kings and prime ministers. Can you see how this is tied to the fact that in the secondary competition of men, where it is cut into absolute terms, that is where conditional sight is necessary. You have one competitor. You have the cats looking at the birds. You have the capitalists looking at the communists. You have, to remind you, you can take all this away from out there and put it right in here because you have got the same boundaries. You have got the same apparent conflicts. You have got what appears to be, if you can see it this way, an institutional setting wherein apparently all of your thoughts, where all of your information came from, except for those of you, of course, that can tell me what you're going to say next. Now, of course, you're beyond all this. It is a kind of institutionalized, driven sight that makes the competition, that makes all night eyes appear to be, at best, or generally, they appear to be in two flat dimensions. It is a kind of variation of the binocular sight, literally, of man. And it results in an ordinary person using this polarized vision so that one eye, is that E-Y-E or I? I don't know. So that one eye looks upon one's neighbor, one's not eye, with one eye as a potential competitor. And yet, operationally, in a kind of independence where you can become wall-eyed, anybody knows what that means, that the other eye can look upon the same neighbor and see it as potential food. And there is no way at the ordinary level, as you can check with yourself from last time and tonight, there's no way that the ordinary intellect can put these two together. There's no way that it can see them as in being connected, much less being synonymous. But this is a kind of conditional sight that one eye, just operational, that's not the point to prove it, but it is as though one of the polarized eyes that you can look upon any not eye, whatever you want to call it, just another person. And you can look upon them, and one eye, according to whatever the needs of life are at that moment, but one eye can independently look upon another person as a potential competitor. A bird can look upon a worm with one eye and see it as another bird. That is, as a potential competitor. It can simultaneously, as though there were almost no connection whatsoever, no exchange of information, that the other eye can look upon that same not eye as being potential food. It turns out, to plagiarize whoever it was, I was going to say that never the twain shall meet. The British writer that had too much gin and laid out in the sun in India. Somebody can think of his name. But at any rate, it is as though, to take that old phrase, that never the two shall meet. And yet if we were talking about a revolutionist turf, neurally, a subversive highway, it's not a matter that never the two shall meet. It is a matter that all twos must meet. They must meet. And then we could ask if anyone would like to try and forge out a new synonym for the word meet. You know, those kind of funny synonyms. Well, I had several terms come to mind. Since in the ordinary world that never the twain shall meet. East and west can never meet. Up and down. Wherein from a subversive view, from a non-sequential, polarized view, all twos must meet. The synonyms of, I was thinking of terms. Meet. Well, I could say merge, but I had more in mind like this, since I pulled the picture of a revolutionist highway, that never the twain shall meet. Instead of meet, how about head-on collision? How about being able to participate in a neural demolition derby? Because in a sense, that is the kind of, I wasn't going into this, but that is where they got the idea. They don't know, but that's where they got the idea for the particle accelerators. Don't any of you physicists write me, because I'm not here to deal with that, but that's where they got the idea. I know in fact, revolutionists that they got that from, they forgot about it. They don't know, but never mind. It is a kind of continual, and that's just one stage of it. It can be quite brief. But it is the kind of neural arrangement, the kind of flow of energy, wherein that everybody else in life, as they're supposed to, and you have done it, and you continue to do it, that you think, you ponder, you meditate, mull. Do people still mull? And that passes, as it should, but that passes for being a kind of contemporary example of advanced thought. That you find someone somewhere throughout history, but you can find somebody somewhere today. They'll raise their hand if you call out for them and say, I am still amazed that in the 1990s that people in otherwise fairly civilized areas, Lebanon, Ireland, even parts of New Jersey, that there are people fighting, killing one another over some idea of a God in the sky, or over an idea that, wait a minute, you can't talk about Karl Marx like that in front of me. And they say, this is amazing. In some way, we've got to sit down and we have got to come together. We have got to negotiate this. We have got to realize that we're all here on this planet and we can't continue to kill each other because one group says, you people are holding religious services and you're speaking in Latin. And God sent word to stop that shit. Talk in English so he can understand what you're saying, and the rest of us too. And they say, we can't do this anymore. And again, it sounds as though we're on the cusp of a new day. Where does that get one? Because it can sound as though, well, here's a man exemplifying more inclusive thought, a man who is more broad-minded, an intellect here verging on the truly objective. What I was trying to insinuate by my little picture of a subversive or revolutionist highway, some of these laws from six-dimensional physics do not translate well. I know it offends some. But it translates this kind of, we've got to bring these together. We've got to consider both sides. if you start getting past the three-dimensional level, it's better expressed as frig negotiations, stuff objectivity, screw magnanimity. It's got to be a head-on collision. If you're going to be driving down a Ural highway and you think, well, I am no longer the crude sort that I was, thanks to my parents. I no longer ride along in a 61 Dart. I now have a sleek, lean machine, damn near graduated from college, and you fly down life's highway. But you now think you could, that I am no longer the provincial Clyde that I once was. I now fly past the signpost in life that over here says, we're Catholics, or we're Jews, or we're Italians. There was a time that I would go by, and not being a Catholic, Jewish, Italian, I would go, ha! Or I would think very naughty thoughts about them. But now I realize, oh, I still have some of that. It's not my fault. My parents, they were prejudiced as hell. It's not my fault. But now, at least, I do not just out of hand go past a temple, a church, a group of Italians out there doing whatever the hell they do when they get in groups. And I do not simply go by now and scoff or laugh or make international signs of goodwill toward them. I now whizzle along in my car and I think, wait a minute. I have reason to think some way that Italians out in the field have as much right to be out there probably as I do. I mean, well, based on the fact that right now I'm not in the mood to stop and go out there in the field, they're not taking up my space. You know, why should I go by and laugh or scoff at whatever they're doing or be angry? That sounds as though that you are on the freeway to happiness, the road to intellectual enlightenment. But it won't do. I had in mind more. I've already said it. But I had in mind more. You got to have head-on collisions. Because you can drive along and think that the rest of your life. Humanity has been thinking that all of their life thus far, some part of it, because this is nothing new. I just changed the more metaphors into highways and automobiles, but there's nothing new. And it's not because that one side is right or wrong. I shouldn't even have to do this, but here I go. It's not that, well, here I am prejudiced in some way, thanks to my parents. Of course, maybe it wasn't their fault, but their parents did to them, and I don't have time to go into that. But at any rate, I am no longer anti-everything. Because now I think, I mean, maybe the people need some help and all that, but I'm not just out of hand anti-people. We have got to try and consider other people's viewpoint. We've got to put all of our differences on the table, discuss them, fondle them, massage them, try and put a certain new spin, look at them, and quit killing each other. And there's no way to say in the city, which I'm sure you people are not that dumb anymore. If that's going on, there's no way to stand up and say, wait a minute, you people sound like you're going somewhere, but you ain't going nowhere. You would find out that some liberals carry knives. Some progressives are not complete sissies. The progressive, right-thinking people will probably roll you up in a shirt and throw you out. Because at that level, it is true. That is as much progress as anything. But do you understand, from your own view, well, now you've had, most of you, 20 or 30 years at least, and humanity has had a lot more than that, to go along that line. So, well, we got to put it all out here and consider it. From a revolutionist view, the point is, as soon as you understand that something's wrong with you, that something in your nervous system is not going to buy everything that's going on. As soon as you realize that, you should be past the point, I may be putting the words on it for the first time, but you're past the point of believing that there's some kind of objective big banquet table somewhere that you're going to sit down with humanity, or that humanity is going to sit down and work all this out. I mean, if you believe that, fine. You're right where you belong. You don't belong here. But you're right there on the freeway. You're right there with everyone else, and you can be saying, you can be sailing along, the radio's playing, and it's saying, We are right-thinking people. We're forward-minded people. Well, hell yeah, I'm not saying you're not, but you're not going anywhere. That is not what this itch is. And it's not because one of them's right and one of them's wrong. It's that they're looking at, as they're supposed to, being in the middle of it, it is fish looking at water. It is a polarized, driven brain looking and saying, wait a minute, I've been around. I hate to brag, but I am fairly sophisticated, several degrees. I've been around, and let me tell you, I realize right over here, the problem is they've divided themselves into two camps. The man is a friggin' genius, right? What do you expect in polarized regions? And the point being, to believe, to go along with that, that I am beginning to realize that in some way, due to their own God knows what, probably poor background and not enough vitamin E, but these people continue to divide themselves up in these armed camps over religion or what, I don't even know what it is, but they continue to be divisive in their lives, that it's always some kind of conflict. And I almost figured that out on my own. I may have read it somewhere. Where is that going? I mean, once you understand it, where is the breakthrough to strip a wire plugged into a socket and to reach down there and grab it and find out that it's AC current? That's what's driving that television set. That's what's driving these lights. What have you gained besides second-degree burns? For the polarized, driven brain to look around and say, wait a minute, I'm beginning to suspect that life, and it might then turn on me and say, well, what you're saying, the secondary world of man continues through some sort of faulty arrangement. Things are not on the right footing. They continue to fall into these two groups that keep conflicting at no profit whatsoever. Once you see it, I'm going to do it again as a little sham sarcasm. What do you expect once you see it? There is nothing else to see. What it thinks it sees after that is the idea of progress, utopia. That is, no more conflict. That the good side will finally triumph and we'll be rid of those smelly birds. I had another example. I almost tripped is where I was making the original joke when we started. But there is a beautiful example tied to this that's not a metaphor for anything, if we could ever drop to metaphors. It's not a metaphor, which it sounds like it once I get started, if you were listening at old metaphorical level. It's not a metaphorical example of something or other, it's an example of what it is. That's the trick about just being able to see what life is doing. That is, if any of you like this kind of stuff, nobody writes it. There are things known nationwide as, I know they've got different brand company names, but 7-Eleven stores, convenience stores. And they are very, very popular, even in our part of the cutting edge of civilization here in the United States, and now, thank be to the gods, Western Europe, South America, Latin America are now becoming privileged to be proud owners, franchisees, and customers of convenience stores. In case you never thought about it, I'm going to do it for you, because they didn't think about it. I just looked around, and the sixth dimension made the convenience stores talk. When they began to consider site locations, convenience stores, think about the name. You might think at first, well, what do? They'd go out and do traffic counts. They want to find a place that has a heavy traffic penetration. Oh, I'm sure they discussed that. But you know what really goes into it, from a certain view, is the proximity to housing wherein the people may not have continual ready availability to transportation. Thus, it becomes convenient, if they have to, for them to walk to this store. Now, I've even noticed, and I'm sure you have, that the advertising that these convenience stores do, what little they do, they don't evidently have to do much. But the times I've seen in my lifetime that they did it, public on a large scale, was on the basis, pull in your car right quick and you can jump out and you can get in there right quick and get what it is you want and not have to stand in line at some chain supermarket or a drugstore. That's not what supports those businesses. May I also assume that all of you know that they charge dramatically higher prices for the exact same items than a chain grocery store, drugstore, sundry store. Do they still have sundry stores for people? I bet they do, for people who still want a mole. You can go in a sundry store, because I bet if you walked into, forget a sundry store, I bet if you walked into a super discount store, a Walmart or a Kmart, and I bet you if you went over in the corner and you were hanging around, that finally somebody'd come say, "Sir, are you mulling?" If so, you know where the sundry store is. If there's still one in that little town, they'll send you there. But back to something important. I assume you all know, if you have not checked, they charge dramatically higher prices for a can of Campbell soup, some brand name that you can identify, considerably more, not just a few cents, percentage-wise considerably more than you could go down the street and go into a large chain store, normally called, and buy the same item. But then you might think, since I'd brought up that part of the serious consideration of site location and selection is its proximity to people who are least likely to have continual access to their own individual transportation, sometimes known as an automobile. And so then you might think, well, based upon that, going along with my little story, you might think, well, wait a minute. They got them by the short hairs. They'll go build these so-called convenience stores out somewhere, housing projects, lower class neighborhoods. And all you're saying is they get them there and then they charge wherever they want to. That almost sounds all right, right? If Sinclair Lewis were alive today, he could bring it up to date and write an expose of 7-Eleven stores doing this to the poor people of the world. Wait a minute. This is the United States, Western Hemisphere, 1991. May I suggest to you, and may I further suggest that you cannot rebut it, that by and large, the people who actually go there, not just somebody driving by to pop in and buy a soda that they're real hot and just pop in, it's the closest place. I'm talking people that actually will get up and go there, and they may walk, but they will go there. But this is today, and this is where we are. May I suggest to you, they are paying outrageous, it amounts to rip-off prices. And those same people, I suggest to you, in some way, if they had to actually pay for a cab, or at least a bus, but if they had to pay for a cab to take them and actually go do shopping, may I suggest to you that they would still probably save money. Figuratively speaking, either trust me or don't trust me, leave and go check it. Because what I'm telling you is not a metaphor. So don't keep looking that, well, maybe that's true. It is true. But if ordinary people are hearing this, they say, wait, there's some kind of metaphorical message to this. Why? Now, we've already established, long before you and I started talking, that man is a rational, thinking creature, driven by his own self-interest. That's the name of the game. That is not an attack on the shortcomings of morality. Everyone would agree to that. Everybody who's civilized and intelligent. That a man has got to look after his own interest. That's simply a factor. He is not sane. He is not the middle of the bell curve of life. And everybody says, all right, we got that. Then I ask you, why the same person, it's got nothing to do with intelligence, it's got nothing to do with them living in a poor neighborhood, that somebody goes down there and they know if you stopped them and said, they went in there and they bought a little sack of groceries and it comes out, I don't know, $17. And they go walking out and you stop them and you say, sir, could I point out to you? And you look at the items and you say, you could have bought those same items, purchased them right down the street there at Frank's or Big Star or A&P or somebody, a big chain. And these drugs that you bought, right next door is a drugstore there. What you paid $17 for, you could have gotten for $7. And the man might have said, well, I know that. Then you got to ask, or I'm asking you to ask. Why? And don't take those kind of metaphorical, well, there is no well. Not if you can think beyond the polarized level. You've got to ask, why is it that man, looking after his own best interest, why would a man go in there and waste money? And I suggest to you that the name convenience store is far beyond the mere crude grasp of metaphors. It's down there beyond the hold of symbolism. It is the convenience of habit. It is the convenience that manifests itself in man in the world of ideas. When you take, which everyone does at the ordinary level, when you take the readily convenient neighborhood ideas that life has to offer, to say the very least, you are being, from a revolutionist view, you are being severely, almost criminally overcharged. And yet, based upon the kind of games I continue to do of me talking like I'm talking to somebody and calling ordinary intelligence, you could get ordinary people and do some of the things that we try to do to each other, like, do you know what you're going to say next? And of course you do not, which would just scare the kidneys and lungs of an ordinary man if he could hold this polarized attack on his freeway right quick, because he would understand I've only got a split second and it's like 14 18-wheelers about to hit me head on to ask somebody, listen to me, answer this question, do you know what you're going to say next? I've played this on you enough. No. Not only do you not know, you cannot think about that. Literally. The energy is running amok. The electrical energy. And if you ask ordinary people, though, for a split second, you said, do you realize that everything you think you have been, I'm not saying a conspiracy, but everything you think you picked up somewhere. Oh, yeah. And do you also realize you did not pick it up at any great expense to yourself? Now, don't tell me, I know you went to school, I know you went 5 years, I know that you even had to work your way part of the way. We're not talking about you out there working, or you having to spend hours making your fingers sore writing off for grants and applying for scholarship. No. We're talking about actually the world of ideas. Where does everyone shop? At the convenience store. And I could, what I started to say, I might be able to grab an ordinary intellect here and there and say, do you understand? It could be a man with a PhD, 2 or 3 degrees. And I could say, do you realize that you shop at a convenience store intellectually? And if, I guess it's good we only got 5 minutes worth of tape, because you either got to see this, because it's not a metaphor. I might be able to get an ordinary intellect, surely you can see, some of you, that quite literally you shop at a convenience store wherein things are overpriced. Now, there's no way to compare it at the polarized level, that is to ordinary intellects. Because I can say it's overpriced, and I go, well, where are you going to go? But all of you should realize it's overpriced on this basis that everything that you have tried to think, that you try to learn, that's readily available in life. And it can be Harvard, but it's still a 7-Eleven store. Because the institution served its purpose. It assisted you in not having to think. Thank you. That'll only be $12,000 a year. In a bargain at twice the price. But I might, for a split second, in the same way I might get somebody if I said, what are you going to say next? And they looked up, and there are the lights of 14 18-wheelers. Don't ask me how we got them on the highway. And there you are in your little duster or dart. And here they come. And the road's only as wide as your little car. Don't ask me how we got 14 semis, but they're there, and that's what you see for a split second. By that same kind of token, what I'm suggesting is I might be able to get some intellects here and there for a split second to realize what I'm saying. That, yeah, I shop at a convenience store, and I don't know, you can't prove what you're telling me, but you're right. All the merchandise is overpriced. They don't know where else to go now, but they know it's overpriced. They know I'm being ripped off. But it's gone like that because it's so convenient. But sir, that little sack of groceries, if you'd just gone down the street, I mean, if you'd walked twice as far, if you'd borrowed your brother-in-law's car, or the damn bus runs, and it's just over the hill there, you could have gotten this for half price. Yeah, I know. How can you explain that? And it's not stupidity. How can you explain that? That here is a man looking after his own rational, best self-interest, and yet he is squandering money, which is energy. For what? How can you explain that? It is the convenience of continuity. It is the convenience of life exercises through habit. But everything that you pay for at the institutional level, I'm being crude from our viewpoint right here at the end, is a ripoff. It is the same way as paying 70 cents for a can of tomato soup at a 7-Eleven store when you could go down to A&P and get it for 32 cents. And you know it is the thing. You know it. And you also know for that split second that you look up and there's all the headlights. For that split second, you do know that, yeah, I'm aware of that. I know it's true all the time, and I no longer think about it. The neighborhood does not revolt. The people there that shop convenience store, if you got them all, not just one guy, but if you stood there all day and you told everybody, do you realize that sack of groceries costs about twice as much as it does over the hill? They'd all go, well, yeah, I knew that. And you go, well, if you're waiting to start putting up barricades and you got picket signs, where's the revolt? That they know that in a sense they are being robbed. They're being overpriced. The same merchandise. At city level, everything is worth what it's worth. But in one sense, it cannot be proven. There's nothing else to even say verbally on a polarized scale, which is all these sound waves are limited to. There's no way to say how it's compared to something else, except every now and then, and of course plenty of you can, I'm hoping, if I can just say that it's all overpriced, you know it is. But if you're going to look around at somebody out in the city to help you from there, you know it's not true, because if you went somewhere in the city for help, then wait a minute, I had this idea. Let's say you stole it from me. Or you don't give me credit, I don't even care. You run somewhere in the city, to Harvard, to the world's greatest thinker in the city, and you say, I've had this idea that all ideas are overpriced. Can you help me? Is that a good ending place? You want to fill in your own blanks about what the institution will say, what the world's greatest city thinker will say, what life will say through those people? Do you say, I've had this feeling that no matter what I've done, I went to Harvard, I changed religions, I read books, I meditate, but it's like all of this came from the same place. And now I've had this idea, metaphorical as it may be, that I'm getting all my ideas at a 7-Eleven store and I'm being overcharged. And I've always thought that if I get my hands on you, this person or this institution, that if I could present this, that you could help me. Can you help me? And the institution says, I think we'll leave it that way. You fill it in. And the institution replies that, always let me a good punchline. I'm inclined to give one, but this was not. Think about yourself. That you present it, and the institution seems to listen. That you said, I've had this idea, that all of my thoughts, all the ideas are like shopping at a 7-Eleven store where everything is overpriced. And I'm just almost convinced of it. And I need somebody to tell me, where do I go from here? And all the time you said that, those few minutes, the institution is going, as though it's following what you said. And you say, can you help me? And where I was going to end was, like fill in the caption of a cartoon or something, is the institution goes, and you fill it in. As I said, I was going to give one punchline so we can stop the tape. I was going to say, take this as a joke. Not the serious stuff that you guys can come up with. But you tell that you feel like, that metaphorically, symbolically, and perhaps literally, that all of your ideas, all the information, you are being overcharged the same as if you were shopping at a 7-Eleven store and being overcharged for the same kind of stuff that should not cost that much. Can you help me? And the institution says, you got any money? Are you going to make me go through this sham again? I'm going to mash it like